Hi everyone, today we are talking about that burning sensation that you feel during exercise. And I'm always saying how the burn in itself isn't the stimulus that causes muscle growth. So if it's not causing muscle growth, what is the benefit of exercises that burn? So many of us are familiar with that burning sensation that happens during exercise. And this burn is called metabolic stress. It happens when a buildup of metabolites like lactate and hydrogen cause an uncomfortable sensation within the muscle tissue. This happens when an exercise relies on anaerobic glycolysis for energy, usually in an exercise that is a little bit longer. Could last anywhere from 15 to 120 seconds, but generally you start to feel the burn when an exercise exceeds about 45 seconds long. This burning sensation is associated with discomfort and therefore fatigue, which is important to note and something that we'll discuss here in just a moment. So this metabolite buildup, does it stimulate growth? Research once thought that metabolic stress builds muscle, but it has since been debunked. More current research shows that metabolic stress is associated with muscle growth, but does not cause muscle growth. It's not the stimulus that triggers muscle growth. What causes muscle growth is mechanical tension. Mechanical tension is force spread over a muscle. So as you're lifting weights, the force to the muscle causes that muscle to fatigue. If you lift heavy enough and with enough reps, that muscle will eventually fail and not be able to complete another repetition despite your best efforts, and that's because of the mechanical tension placed upon the muscle. That failure point is really important to understand because it means that there was sufficient mechanical tension to trigger a cascade of effects in the tissue that ultimately cause muscle growth. Research shows that you don't have to go all the way to muscle failure, but you do have to get close, like a few reps shy of muscle failure. You know you're close to muscle failure if your velocity decreases. Again, for those of you that listen every week, I apologize. I probably sound like such a broken record, but I understand that there are new listeners all the time, so we always have to kind of go back to the basics. Now, you can use a wide variety of rep schemes. You can lift lighter for all the way up to 30 reps, or you can lift heavier for 6-ish reps. As long as you are getting close to failure, anywhere from 6 to 30-ish reps, that will be the stimulus that is effective for driving muscle growth. When you get into the higher rep ranges, so again, in a set that's like 45 seconds or longer, you're going to start to feel that burning sensation. This is metabolic stress. If you feel a burn, but you can still approach muscular failure, then that's totally fine. But as I mentioned earlier, that burn causes fatigue. That fatigue will influence you to stop the exercise. So if you find that you're stopping an exercise because of the discomfort of the burn and or fatigue or like a shake or trembling, but you did not have a decrease in velocity, you won't see much change in muscle growth. So you can have the burn as long as you're getting close to muscle failure, and that can be effective for muscle growth. But if you have the burn and you're not close to muscle failure, that's not effective for muscle growth. So the burn can be there, but it isn't what's causing muscle growth like we once thought. Now, what is the burn doing? A persistent fitness myth is that very light load training with high repetitions, like some bar methods or some Pilates methods or some megaformer type workouts, the thought is that really high repetition, it burns, you're shaking, you're trembling, and so therefore it tones the muscles. The scientific reality is that muscle appearance is determined by two primary factors, muscle size and body fat percentage. Toning is actually visible muscle definition, which requires both sufficient muscle mass built through training close to failure and low enough body fat to be able to see that muscle. Research shows that very light loads, so above that 30-ish reps, even when performed to failure, typically don't provide enough mechanical tension to stimulate significant muscle growth in trained individuals. Beginners might see some initial changes if they're training with reps higher than that 30 rep, getting close to failure, because beginners will typically see results with almost any resistance program. But if you're trained, the resistance needs to be challenging enough and you need to be able to get close to muscular failure in under 30 reps in order to see meaningful adaptations over time. Those exercises that cause burning and shaking and trembling also are not burning fat, and fat loss primarily comes from nutrition from being in a slight calorie deficit, not from exercise. So the burn in itself isn't building muscle or toning. In other words, very high rep training won't significantly improve body composition. One interesting study that I'll link in the show notes looked at the improvements in fitness from a 12-week gym-based group fitness class that used weights and barbells, but higher reps. So in these classes, they're doing reps well above 30. So squatting for 4-ish minutes, or doing really high rep bicep curls and using weights and using barbells, but the repetitions are well above 30. So they looked at the results from this. The participants were female and untrained. And at the end of the study, the participants saw improvements in muscle endurance and leg strength, but they saw no body composition changes and no muscle mass gain, which is saying a lot because with newbies who are untrained, they will see results from mostly any type of exercise or resistance training. So the fact that these people were not really seeing any changes in body composition or muscle mass says a lot. So again, the weights need to be challenging enough. And I think a common misconception is that, oh, I'm lifting weights in a group fitness classes, or, oh, I have dumbbells in my hands, or, oh, I'm holding a barbell. So I'm lifting weights, that must mean I'm building muscle. But that isn't necessarily true. How close to failure you are and the intensity of the exercise is very important. So the reason that they didn't see any body composition improvements was because they were using loads that were too light. I used to teach classes really similar to this in a gym in college, and these classes are hard. You're sweating, you're shaking, you're sore for days, and yet this highlights that none of those things, soreness, how much you're shaking, how much your muscles are burning, are really that important when it comes to body composition changes if you don't have the proper intensity to build muscle. I would imagine that a lot of group fitness classes where you are doing an exercise for minutes on end would really have similar effects, despite that those classes feel really hard and that you get really sore. Again, I get a lot of questions about, what do you think about XYZ method? And just apply this to that. So if you're like, okay, I'm holding this exercise for like 4 minutes at a time and I'm shaking and it's hard, but I'm not actually getting close to failure, that's not an effective stimulus for muscle growth. Other similar myths about metabolic stress. So one common misconception is that light load or burning sets are superior for building mind-muscle connection. However, research shows that mind-muscle connection can be effectively developed through any load with deliberate practice and focused attention. So the belief that light load training improves mind-muscle connection more than heavier load training isn't necessarily true. As long as you are focused on the exercise and you are bringing your mind to your muscle, you can still improve your mind-muscle connection with slightly heavier loads. Additionally, kind of tangential to this is the belief that light load training improves stability more than heavier training. And I used to say this, but I think that this lacks scientific support. Stability improvements appear more related to movement practice and neural adaptation than the presence of metabolic stress. So the burn in itself with really high rep training isn't necessarily what causes stability. You can improve your stability even without a burning sensation if you are challenging muscles. Again, improving that mind-body connection is what's going to improve stability. So what's the purpose of the burn? Are there any benefits to adding higher rep training that burn, quote unquote, but doesn't necessarily get close to failure? To be honest, it was difficult for me to find a straightforward answer in the literature. And when I say I researched for this episode for like 15 hours, I was digging through the research. I wanted to see what were the real changes if someone just kind of did a hypertrophy and strength training program like Evlo, or if someone was doing a hypertrophy and strength training program in addition to something like going to an hour-long bar class, or I'm just using bar as an example. I'm not trying to pick on bar, but a method that used really high rep, didn't get close to failure, but you were like burning and shaking. I wanted to see what the effects were. And there wasn't a study that looked at this, that looked at the comparison of those two groups. So we just kind of have to infer based on what we know. So what we do know is this type of training that is higher rep and that isn't getting close to failure but does burn can improve endurance in the muscle that you're working, which may improve things in your daily life like carrying groceries or having to hold a backpack for a long period of time. But aside from that, the benefits really aren't as remarkable as they are when you train close to failure in 30 reps or less. What about posture? That's another kind of thing that I hear a lot is this type of training improves posture. From what I could find, there aren't any studies that directly compare the postural changes from a low load, high rep training versus higher load, lower rep training. So again, I just have to kind of infer based on what I understand about the body. So general strength training will improve your posture, working all the muscles in your body, improving strength, improving stability, will help improve your posture. You don't have to do a specific type of method in order to improve your posture. Like you don't have to do Pilates to improve your posture. Additionally, posture is so much more than strength and endurance of the muscles. It has to do with the position that you're in most often. If you're doing a Pilates class, but then you're sitting slumped over in a desk all day, I don't know how much of a difference that's going to have in your overall posture. Posture is also dependent on things like your eyesight. As you develop worse eyesight, your posture is affected. Things like your vestibular system, even your emotional state will affect your posture. So it's not just musculoskeletal training. It's not just how you're working out that's going to have an effect on your posture. So doing high rep training just for the postural improvements may not be worth your time unless it's something that you just genuinely enjoy. And I think that that's where the distinction needs to be here is that, okay, are there merits to doing a hypertrophy routine like Evelo where you're getting close to muscular failure in your lifts, and then additionally adding on an hour-long workout where you're not doing that, but it burns, you're doing the higher rep training? Are there merits to that? I think in general, the physiological merits are not super obvious. But if it's something that you enjoy and you love and it gets you moving, and you're not noticing that it's affecting your recovery from workout to workout, I think it's totally fine to add it in. However, some studies show that that really high rep training tends to affect your recovery. You tend to get really sore afterwards. So if that is not allowing you to put in high quality effort in your strength training session where you are training close to failure, I would caution against doing something like that or adding something like that into your routine. Again, because it's not spot treating fat, it's not toning muscles, it's not doing much physically for the muscle, it's improving endurance slightly. But strength training can also improve endurance. So it's difficult for me to give a straightforward answer. If you just enjoy it or if you like to go to a class and you like the community, I think that's totally fine. But understanding what it is and what it isn't doing for your body, I think is important. So all that said, should you do exercises that burn? The burn can certainly be there, but don't worry if it's not there. You can build muscle even if you don't have a burning sensation. What about doing exercises like a drop set, like we do in Evelo? We'll do our primary lift. Let's say we're doing like skull crushers with weights and we're getting close to failure with our weights, and then we'll grab a band and we'll do a drop set. And that drop set, you're not necessarily getting close to failure, but you are feeling that burning sensation. This type of training will improve endurance, and I like to think of it more as a sprinkle into your workout rather than the bread and butter. It certainly isn't necessary for muscle growth, but I do enjoy those type of exercises in small quantities within my workout where I'm also getting close to failure. So I think if you are choosing exercises like drop sets and things like bands, sprinkling them into your routine, but making sure that the bulk of your training is exercises where you're getting close to failure is what's going to drive the most significant changes for your body. But if you are only training in ways that burn and you're not getting close to failure, I do recommend adding in resistance training where you are approaching muscular failure in those 30 reps or less in every muscle group in your body. Hope this was helpful. We will see you all next week, same time, same place. Bye for now.